Welcome to the Builders Podcast, episode 109. Alex Fink, a mission to clean up the web, creation of an AI-driven content filtering platform. Before we jump into this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, hit that notification bell if you're on YouTube, and after a listen, please give us a thumbs up, like, and share, if we've earned it. With your help, we can reach more people and deliver these valuable from the trenches lessons to those that need it. Enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another The Builders. Today, we are joined by Alex Fink. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
So Alex is he's trying to fix the internet. He is building stuff to clean up the junk, and we're going to dig into that today. We're going to dig into all the junk, so that'll be fun. But where we start with every episode, when somebody's on for the first time, is we talk about your story or a guest story, whoever I'm talking to. Sometimes I'm talking to the audience, sometimes I'm talking to you. But let's start there. Why don't you kind of introduce yourself a little bit more, and then let's tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got started in entrepreneurship, what influenced you, who influenced you, why you landed on building businesses or creating products or creating solutions and all that good stuff.
So I started on the tech side of things, and I have a bachelor's in computer sciences. I did get an MBA somewhere along the way, but that was mostly just because I was bored. I was taking courses on Coursera, and at some point I looked at my list of courses and I realized this looks a lot like an MBA, so why don't I do this officially? I didn't have a purpose for it. But in terms of where my tech work focused, I spent something like 15 years building perception systems, and I just accidentally got pigeonholed into it initially. But cameras, computer vision, that sort of thing. And sometime last year, it just dawned on me that the world does not need more cameras. I'm generating enormous amounts of information, but when I look around me, it seems like most people are consuming junk. And so our problem is not that we're not creating enough information. Our problem seems to be that we are drowning in the information we're creating. And we have to figure out some way to make sense of the world around us. And it seems like we're becoming worse and worse at it. I'm seeing more examples of things that are egregiously bad around me. And they're not bad in the sense that some nefarious actor somewhere spent an inordinate amount of effort to make it bad. They're bad in the sense that I open Google News and I see an article from CNN titled "Stop what you're doing and watch this elephant play with bubbles." That's an actual screenshot I have, right? And I see these things every day, and I see more and more of them over the past 20 years or so, because I suspect most content is monetized through advertising. Advertising pays per click or per view. There's no pay per quality or pay per truth. And so over time, this entire ecosystem of content is just turning into clickbait. And sure, there are good outlets and bad outlets, but the good outlets are not as good as they used to be 20 years ago. Everything is becoming bad.
Gotcha. So it sounds like you're I'm trying to get kind of into like why is this bothering you so much? Is this kind of like a personal thing? You're doing this other thing. You're doing the visual stuff. What do you call that? Visual. You had a good name for it. Visual
perception.
Cameras. Perception.
Yeah.
You're doing that, and then you're seeing like, well, maybe we don't need more of this in the world. But I am spending a lot of time on the internet. I'm seeing a lot of junk. And so were you looking for solutions to that and you couldn't find a good solution for yourself and you're like, I could build this because I have that tech background? Or did somebody put the bug in your ear and said, this would be a good idea, let's do that? Were you actively looking for that issue? How did that
So I think it's a bit more abstract than that. I've been spending most of my free time consuming information as much as I could get my hands on. So you could call me an information junkie, I guess, since I was a kid. And I have a good memory, so I memorize most of the things I see. I can recall things that I've accidentally read 25 years ago, things like that. right? And so if I notice that more and more of what I'm consuming is becoming rubbish, right? That is noticeable to me because I'm actually remembering all this rubbish and my head is getting more and more clogged by it. So there's a personal element here. And then there's the more abstract element where if I'm seeing that the cameras and computer vision that I'm building are not really making the world a better place, at some point I started developing this dissonance internally. Like my work, the things that I do to make a living, don't actually connect to my idea of what makes the world better, right? And so that's an unpleasant place to be in. And I've been talking about this with people, and there was just one conversation with my wife where I told her that seems like a pretty bad state where I'm basically building things I don't believe in. I'm building some things that seem bad as far as my ideological leanings are concerned, right? Cameras that recognize faces and license plates and basically document where everybody's going. What should I be doing? Should I be trying to fix this, or should I just accept the situation where here's what I do to make money, here's what I believe is good, there's no connection between the two? And I guess my wife to some extent pushed me to, well, what do you think you could work out that is actually good? And I told her this idea that I think we are missing a content filter of some sort. We're missing the equivalent of peer review or the equivalent of the scientific method. That if you look historically, right, you had the printing press invented in the 1430s, and what followed was almost 200 years of inquisitions, witch hunts, 52 different religious wars throughout Europe, etc. And then you get the scientific method and peer review and the Enlightenment, right? We're missing this last part, and we're still in these 200 years, just the current causes the internet and not the printing press. And so that's the idea I had. We need an equivalent of peer review applied to journalism, applied to everything, including elephants blowing bubbles. What exactly that should look like, I don't know yet.
Just because elephants are blowing bubbles doesn't mean that I need to see that.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean that I need to consume that.
It doesn't mean that I need to see that, but it's clear why I'm seeing it, right?
Yeah.
I'm seeing it because other people who saw it clicked on it. Right? So those elephants blowing bubbles are serving a purpose, right? They are actually really good at that purpose. It's like, and if you switch to this mindset, you look at a headline, you look at an image, and instead of just reacting to it, you ask yourself, what is this doing? What job is this headline serving? Most of the time, that job is not to inform you. It's not to share useful things with the world. It's primarily just to get you to click or view more ads, right? Yeah. Engage, exactly. And if you think of engagement as a metric, it is a pretty flawed one. I tend to have this mental exercise of, let's say you're walking down the street and somebody offers you cake from a nearby bakery. Mm-hmm. Would you engage with it? Would you try it? Probably yes, right? If they offered you kale from a local health store, you probably wouldn't engage with it right away. But what do you want to consume more long term, cake or kale? Right, so there's a big difference. Yeah. There's a big difference between what we engage with and what we actually want from ourselves.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I consume a lot of junk too. But luckily I don't have that memory, so it's all new to me every day. I'm a big consumer, just YouTube alone. Like I probably spend at least an hour a day on YouTube. Just, I got my list of over a decade of subscription, that people I follow on there and subscribe to, and I consume every morning. The first thing I do is open up my Apple News app, and I'm on social media throughout the day. That's when I'm taking a break, I'm probably usually on my phone. I'm that guy, and I'm consuming a lot of stuff too. So I think this is, we are, as they say, we are what we consume, I guess. I don't know if people say that or not, or something along those lines. But we are what we read. We are what we are. Do something. But what I find is fascinating with your story so far is that, and what I think a lot of really successful entrepreneurs, the more successful entrepreneurs out there, they have like a larger purpose, a larger why. and something that's transcends just making money, just going to work and doing this thing. You're not thinking about how it's affecting the world. But I think it's I don't know how unique it is, but it's really refreshing to hear somebody talking from that perspective. There's somebody that actually cares about the world and wants to make an impact on the world. We need more of those people in the world, and to see that you're doing something has no impact at all, and you're like, well, what can I do? And to have a wife that actually helps you in that regard too is always good.
It is.
Somebody in your life, yeah.
And I should mention that we also registered as a public benefit corporation so that we can write in our corporation documents that information quality is the goal, not just maximizing shareholder value. And we're trying to also do other things, which I don't know if it will have as much of an impact given the current state of AI, but we opened all of our models so that they are source available, so other people can look at how they work, can audit them, etc. So, a lot of companies get corrupted somewhere down the line. They start with a great mission of organizing the world's information. You know which one I'm talking about, right? Or connecting the world. You probably know that one too, right? But at some point, when they have institutional investors join or when they have an IPO, all of these things get lost, and essentially the real mission becomes the numbers for the next quarter.
Yeah.
And everything else is just an exercise in PR. We have a mission. Why does it exist? So that when we recruit, people can read our About Us page and see we have a mission, right? So we're trying to put the mission, I wouldn't say first, but at least on par with the basic purpose of a corporation, which is to make money.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that is sustainable. I hope that will not turn investors off. One of the other things we did right now is to try to avoid institutional money, at least at first, and raise through crowdfunding from normal people investing their own money because they believe in something. Again, is it going to work and help us sustain the mission long term? I don't know. But it seems like an experiment worth trying.
Crowdfunding's interesting. I mean, how does that work? You're doing that now to help.
We actually launched a campaign exactly 1 week ago, and so far we're at 180,000, I think.
Whoa! Congratulations.
Yeah, so it's
That's
going
amazing.
pretty well, but I still don't know. I expect that typically there's a fast start, then there's some sort of a lull, and then a fast ending, hopefully. But I think we're entering the lull potentially, unless this podcast has such a great following and the people who listen to it care so much that they will run and also support us, which I hope is true.
Well, at least it only takes one person to share this, or never know. But yes, so I'm curious about crowdfunding though. Like, so how do you, where do you do that? Like, where do you, if let's say I'm a business that wants to do some crowdfunding. I don't think I've even talked about crowdfunding much on this podcast.
Yeah, there's a few platforms. It essentially became legal in 2016 to solicit money from non-accredited investors. Before that, you could only go to people who have a net worth of, I think, more than $1 million or income of more than $200,000 a year individually, not as a couple, and only they could invest. From 2016 onward, you could start raising money from people who don't qualify for those criteria, and the limit was, I think, $1 million per year. And recently, it was raised to $5 million a year. So now you have Reg CF crowdfunding, which allows you to raise money this way. So there's a few websites that act as the middlemen that essentially handle all the paperwork, and which already have a community of investors that are active on them. So you probably still need to bring most traffic, but maybe they supplement a little bit with their own people. So we are launching on WeFunder, which is one of the two biggest ones, and it's the one that seems mostly focused on these kind of big missions that try to improve the world. In fact, WeFunder is also a public benefit corporation. The other big one is Start Engine, and I think they recently acquired the number 3 player, which I forget what it's called. But they seem to be much more purely commercial, focused on CPG product for the most part, right? They have one of their investors or advisors, Mr. Wonderful, if you know him, Kevin O'Leary, appear 5 times on their front page. So that kind of tells you they're not about, rainbows and unicorns. They're about making money and being cutthroat, because that's what he represents. And there's a few smaller ones. I've even seen some services that allow you to essentially launch your own self-hosted campaign, but they give you the software and the tools and the paperwork to handle that. But to me, that seems like the black belt option. Like, I would rather rely on a website like WeFunder, at least, to handle all the things they've done a million times.
Right.
Than to try to manage everything. Maybe when I'm doing this for the 17th time, then, I can self-host.
This isn't your last endeavor. I can tell you.
No, but also you can come back to this well. So you can raise up to $5 million per year, and there's no limit how many times you can do this.
Oh wow!
So I see some projects that keep launching every year, essentially, right? And it could be that they're raising a new round and they're using WeFunder to supplement their regular round. So let's say they raised 15 million from investors and 5 more from the community. So some companies do that. Some companies only raise from the community, and some businesses lend themselves better to it. I've seen some self-produced video or video production companies come back to it every year. When they're ready to produce new content, they raise money again from the same people, essentially. So there's some interesting uses for it. I think there's also some potential benefit to allowing non-accredited investors to get access to the kind of investment opportunities that only a certain class of people had before, right? There was no way previously for somebody making $100,000 a year to invest in the next Google. But now it seems like more and more often the next Google would actually raise at least some part of a round this way. So maybe it will democratize some element of that as well, though again, you could make the counter argument that it exposes people who can't afford to lose money to the opportunity to lose money, right?
Right.
So that's the darker side of it potentially. The idea behind limiting investments to accredited investors was they can afford to lose it. But
it's kind of how you should run your life, is only risk those things that you can afford to lose. But depends. I mean, I guess depending on what stage of your life is, if you're married, you got kids, those type of things.
And it also depends on people's risk tolerance, right?
Right.
But
I mean,
unfortunately,
like I said, at this point in my life, there was a point in my life where I would risk everything. But now I'm gonna be a little more careful at this point in my life. So, I think it's interesting from my perspective, because I'm only self-funded. I'm not a large. Don't plan on being a large business. Maybe I will be. We'll see. But we're a small growing agency, self-funded, so doing my own thing. But so I am always fascinated to listen to others that are doing much bigger things than I am, probably having much bigger impact on the world. Although I feel like we're trying to have an impact on the world through our clients and stuff. But I was always fascinated by crowdfunding and how people find funding for their businesses to help their ideas get a good kickstart. One of the things that obviously you have to do when you're doing this as well, you have to have a good story around what you're doing, a good message. You probably spent some time developing that, and I imagine a crowdfunding page would have to have, I don't know if it's just a page, a profile, or whatever. You probably have a video pitching what you're doing and all that stuff. And did you do all that yourself, or did you got help with this at this stage?
Well, so it's not myself. I have a team, right? So
you got a team.
OtherWeb is a company that has 1 full-time employee besides myself and about 6 or 7 contractors.
Okay.
So I did some of the work, but obviously the marketing guy did some work, the videographer did some work. So it was a team effort, which is the way it should be. If I'm doing just that, then who's writing the code, who's developing the actual product, right? So
can't do everything.
I have to limit my exposure to some extent. But no, I think we've done good work creating the video. We've done pretty good work creating the pitch itself. We've taken a very engineering approach to marketing in some sense, in that we literally made a list of all the successful projects on WeFunder of the past few years, and we reversed engineered everything they did. We looked at what ads they ran. We looked at who invested in them. We looked at what was the structure of their pitch, which sections it had in what order, what they put in each section, what did they emphasize, what text did they make bold, what was the structure of their video, what was the length of their video, how often did the founder speak, what the background typically was. Like, we looked at everything we could to try to not make mistakes, because one of the things that you have to consider is this is essentially a ClickFunnels, except you can't A/B test anything. Right?
It's one time go.
Yeah, because you're launching on a third-party website, you cannot actually make two versions and see which one converts better.
Right.
The other thing is, not only can you not A/B test anything, but you're selling a high-ticket item, $100 and up. And so the number of conversions you're going to get is very small, and therefore you have very little data to figure out what works.
Data. Yeah.
Right? So this is why our approach was, let's just try to get it to not suck the first time, because we won't have that much data to go on to fix it later.
That's brilliant, actually. The idea of reverse engineering, looking, how others have done it before. It's I can like a micro example of something similar to this that I can relate to. Where I'm actually working on helping somebody with their product page. It's a successful e-commerce store. We've been helping them. We've been working with them for over a year and a half, and but they want to improve their conversions. And what they did is they went out and they got a conversion expert to review their site, and they created a video. They went through, these are all the things we think. They compared it to their competition or other similar e-commerce stores. So look at what they're doing. they're removing this. They don't have this banner up here. They have this here and that there. And like you're talking about here, like you look at somebody that is successful, and being able, they've probably have tested this for years or whatever, and they probably get a ton of traffic, and they're doing their own A/B split testing. They've done it for you. Now go and copy that. So we're translating what the conversion guy said, and I'm helping them rebuild this page. And there's a lot to say about looking at in this case, it's not really competition. It's people that have come before you, sort of.
Yeah. It's campaigns that are over and they're in a different space. So it's definitely not competition. But I should mention, you need to be really careful when you do something like this, because if a campaign worked well, you don't know why. So it could be that their copy was amazing and that's why it worked. Or it could be that the product was so good it doesn't matter what the copy was, right?
True.
It could be that there was some majestic source of traffic that you don't see. Like they had a mailing list of 250,000 people, and that's why the campaign worked, because they didn't have to do all the work you have to do to actually find people to talk to, right? So you have to be careful, and ideally, if you think an element works, you should be able to see it in multiple campaigns, not just in one. And you need to make sure that you're not copying things that aren't actually a fit for you. I guess another analogy you could think is, there are certain clothes that a very attractive woman can wear that if you try to wear, they won't work for you, right? And therefore, don't copy the clothes.
It certainly would draw attention.
It certainly would draw attention, but that's probably not the kind of attention you want. So yeah, you have to make sure that if you are borrowing the best practices from someone, they are practices that apply to you.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. And your point about you never know where what someone's actual story is and why they're being successful, because there could be a myriad of reasons. Like I said, they could be partnering and have affiliates or something behind the scenes. Maybe not affiliates in this scenario, but they have some partnership with somebody that has all the traffic and very targeted traffic. And that's why you got to be wary of people that are selling you the how to get rich schemes out there and stuff. It's like, are you really going to replicate exactly what they did? There's probably something they're not telling you. Or you're in a different niche that won't work in that niche. Interesting stuff. So now we know a little bit more about crowdfunding. I learned something, so that means my audience will learn something today, or they might be smarter than me and I already knew this stuff. But so onto the solution here. So you have, we'll talk a little bit about your actual product or website and all this stuff and what you're actually doing here. So now we already established that you hate junk and you have an amazing memory. You sound like my wife. She remembers stuff. She's telling me what I ate at some restaurant a year ago. I'm like, how do you even remember that? I don't remember what I ate at a restaurant last week. But so some of us are blessed with that, and some of us are blessed with not having that. So we have a new experience every time. But you don't like the junk, so you decided to. How did you decide to solve that? What is your solution actually? What does that look like?
So there were a few steps to it. So step one is, if we want to do anything to help people consume better information, we have to define what better means. And so the very first step was, a friend and I just created a set of natural language processing filters that evaluate some aspect of content quality. Like, is this headline clickbait or not? That's a pretty simple question. Maybe it's not objectively defined, but for the most part, most people would agree on whether a particular headline is clickbait or not. So if people agree, then we can annotate 10,000 articles this way, or find some academic corpus that already did that for us. And then we can train an AI model to essentially do what the human did, almost as good, but infinitely scalable.
So we created. Before we go further, so how did we get to AI? So you were using AI before in your previous, visual world, like you call it.
A little bit, but I can't claim to be an expert. So in this case, the friend that was helping me, and he's now an advisor to the company, he has a PhD in this from Stanford. Right? There you go. And he manages a lot of money for a very large investment bank using basically the same techniques, right? They scan tweets and things like that for sentiments about a stock. So
there you go.
So yeah, that's kind of how I could kickstart the AI part of things.
That's great. I mean, it's great. It's great bringing people in that have the expertise to establish. Yeah, like I have a team, obviously, and I have people that are smarter in certain areas that I can go to. So that's good to kind of find those people to do this with you and for you. So you bring stuff to the table. I don't know what do you bring to the table?
Everything that I need to, I guess. So I should mention, look, I started off writing code myself, but if you look at what I've done for the last 7 years before that, is I was VP engineering at a startup, and then after that I had my own consulting practice, which essentially helped companies integrate stuff together and outsource things, right? So if a robotics company needed to add a camera that provides inputs to their computer vision team, then I would help them define what they need, go to Eastern Europe for the software, to Asia for the hardware and for the manufacturing, help them divide the work and manage those guys to actually deliver it. So when you're talking about this basic skill set of finding people who can do stuff that I don't know how to do myself or I'm inefficient at, I've done that for a while before, right? Perfect. So that is kind of a core skill set at this point. I can still occasionally roll up my sleeves, which I don't have, but metaphorically speaking, I can roll them up and write code if I need to. I've only done that twice in this company so far, when there was just a particular piece of code that none of the guys I have the right skill set for, and hiring somebody just for that just seems wrong. So in general, because most of the code I wrote back in the day was in very small compact devices like cameras, I'm used to being resource restricted, and I'm used to really count every cycle, every byte of memory consumed, every cache line and when it gets flushed and things like that, right? And most people who write code today don't even think about those things. They don't even know what the cache and the processor that they're running on looks like.
Chunk collection or whatever.
Right? So I'm used to think at a much lower level, which makes me much slower at implementing some big complex system. But if I need to write some high-performance algorithm, then I can do that in the most efficient way possible. So there were a couple of cases in other web's existence where we needed to write something where if a normal backend guy wrote it the way that they're used to writing things, it would run for a few hundred years. And since I wanted to make it run a little bit faster than that, then I just wrote it myself, compiled an executable file for them, and gave it to them so they can embed it in the normal Python pipeline. But for the most part, I try not to write code anymore. Even when I write code, I try not to check it in because I will break the repo. I'm no longer qualified to check in code. I can still read everybody's code and comment on why did you do this, why did you do that, seems inconsistent, things like that. But
no, I think actually, you know, and what it kind of, as you're talking, like I think about other companies and people I've talked to, and the horror stories or the failures out there where you have people that try to develop an app or try to do something, and they didn't have the tech experience, and they just went out and hired somebody to do that or found a partner that just does that. And that often doesn't fail. I think like with you, or that often fails. With you, it's a scenario where you have the tech background. So even though maybe you brought in somebody, a specialist to do AI and all this stuff, you have some idea of what tech is and how to program and how all this stuff should kind of work. So that's got to help you in your position, what you're doing.
I would add to that and say it's actually, in my opinion, a little more complex because I've been outsourcing for so long. I have an unusual view of it in that I think most systems cannot be outsourced properly. So it doesn't actually matter how much experience the guy doing the outsourcing has, how much tech understanding he has. If the system wasn't architected to be outsourced, it's going to be hard to outsource, right? And so a part of my experience and what I've been doing from before is try to design the system to begin with so that each module is nicely wrapped up and independent and has a well-defined interface to the rest of the world. Then you can go out and find an expert who can write exactly that. And then you have the criteria of how to review their work, how to decide whether you accept it or not, how to give them comments, right? But if you just take a pre-existing system and you say, well, I need to improve this module over here, let's hire a guy in Argentina to do that, that's almost doomed to failure. Or at least it's doomed in the sense that whoever reviews and accepts the work is going to spend just as much time as if they had to write it from scratch. Right? So I think systems need to be architected to be outsourceable before they can be outsourced properly. And then, of course, you need to know how to hire those guys, how to manage them yourselves, etc. My approach is never touch an agency. If they have a PM, that's a disqualifier for me. I don't want to deal with PMs, right? I only hire individual guys that I have my own process for vetting them, which is very unusual. So I think I tend to find people who other companies miss. Like, for example, I don't interview contractors. Only trial tasks. Only code on GitHub speaks for them, right? And so a part of what I get is people who are really good at coding but can't pass an interview in a normal company, right? So they get self-selected because I write in the very ad that I post, no interview required. People who really dislike interviews apply, right?
That's actually brilliant because there's got to be a lot of guys out there that are just really, really good at what they do, but their social skills or their communication skills, you know, talking to somebody, trying to do an interview, or they're too nervous to do it or whatever, is lacking. So,
I have two engineers whose voice I never heard. I don't know what they sound like. And I've been working with one of them for over a year and the other for about 8 months. So I think that I'm benefiting here from a gap in the market. The gap is everybody else hires a certain way that selects for a certain skill set, which I don't think it's necessarily the right skill set for being a contractor and working remotely, right? It might be a useful skill set when you're in a cubicle surrounded by other people in the cubicles, and your way to discuss stuff is to shout over the wall of the cubicle, right? Maybe interviews prepare you for that or select for people who are good at that. But I don't think interviews are very efficient for selecting people that you don't actually have to have meetings with. You can just Slack, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And some people are just better at just text and messaging or whatever. I mean, like for me, like in my agency, I guess some, looking at the different roles I have for developers and stuff, like some will interface more with like the client, and so of course I have to have an interview. I have to know they can communicate well, and that actually having that interview is a good thing. So there are good reasons to have it, but for other cases, that's interesting. Love that.
So I think ultimately your hiring process should resemble what the person is going to do as much as possible, right?
Right.
So if it's a sales guy, you want to get them to talk, and then you just sit there and see if they're persuasive, if they're perceptive, if they notice something that you touched on that might be important, even if you didn't emphasize it, things like that, right? But if you're hiring somebody to write a particular type of code, then interviewing them and asking them random logical questions
doesn't make sense.
Probably not going to correlate to good job performance. Or even to the extent that it does, everybody else asks those same logical questions. And so now you're competing with everybody else for the same overpaid people in some sense, right? You could instead go for the people who are really socially awkward, who cannot possibly get through that process, but they're still really good at writing the exact kind of code that you want. There's another aspect of this that I don't know how often that exists or how common that combination of traits is. But I think there is a class of people who are very good with details, who are very conscientious, but are socially awkward. And that combination of traits tends to go together. I know that a lot of tech founders in the Bay Area have Asperger's syndrome, right? I think that is why, right? Because it is very useful for this particular job, and it is pretty bad for the vast majority of jobs that people do in life. But in this particular job of a tech founder, it helps to actually tune all the noise out, not listen to people talking, not even understand whether somebody's judging you or not, and just doing what you think is right and focusing on the details.
Why do I think of one person in mind?
There's quite a few.
Elon guy.
There's well, he's the one who admitted it on television.
Yeah,
but
there's probably many others. Yeah.
Oh, there's many others, and it's known, right? So even if, like, the only podcast that I religiously listen to and never miss an episode. Sorry, it's not the Builders. It's not the Builders. Sorry, I apologize. Mea culpa. No, it's the All In podcast, right? Where you have 4 tech founders talking together. 2 of them have Asperger's syndrome, right? So it is very common among tech founders, and I think it also makes for really good coders in general. But not for all jobs. You don't want the sales guy that doesn't understand anything about the person he's talking to, right?
Yeah. True. Very good. Yeah. So we digress. We do that a lot on this podcast. Back to junk.
Exactly.
No, I love that though, because obviously if you're in business, you're hiring probably, and those are really good tips and it's very interesting insight. So I never think about it that way, like skipping. Never thought about skipping that interview.
Well, and adding things instead, right? So the primary things that I tend to add are trial tasks that are actually something we need, a part of the job, right?
Right.
That are just sized correctly, right?
Yeah. And I do that too. Like if I have a friend and person that's going to just be doing Bootstrap, if you're a web person, if they're just doing Bootstrap, like I have somebody like that, of course I tested her, what am I going to test her on? Here's a Bootstrap template, or here's a design, translate that to Bootstrap. And, and that's some people, I've tested actually a lot of people on that. So some people it's like no brainer. Others, I can do that. And no, you can't.
So I add a few elements to that. Like first, I always ask for an estimate up front, right? Because then I get to test also whether a person is able to estimate how long something will take them.
Oh.
I also sometimes make the task description slightly vague or incomplete on purpose, to see if the person asks questions and communicates well at that level, right? And also for the very initial, smallest trial task, I would usually give it to at least 3 people. Because then I can also comparatively see. I might not be the expert at this particular discipline. Will I be able to know by looking at just one whether his or she is amazing or not, right?
Sure.
If I look at 3, then I will get some sense of which one's obviously better than others. So anyway, those are just some of the tricks. It's I don't know if those are objectively good or just I randomly stumbled into them and they worked for 7 years, and so I keep doing them. But yeah, back to the original topic. So first step was learn how to evaluate information quality. And we did that by evaluating 20 kind of well-defined small aspects and then creating a linear algebra formula to aggregate them into a single score that worked pretty well for news. It worked less well for other types of content. So we can't claim it's universally applicable. It worked really well for news. If we want to train it on podcasts, we will have to at least adjust the formula or maybe even retrain some of the models, right? And then step 2, I should mention we rolled it out as a standalone product. It had hundreds of happy users, but it never took off in terms of thousands or tens of thousands because it was an extra step. You're reading an article in the New York Times, you had to click on an extension and see the scores of this article. So it didn't become very popular, but people were really happy with it. And so our next step was, let's aggregate a lot of content in one place and then add our information automatically to all the content and use it to filter out essentially the bottom 90%. That is probably not something people should be reading regardless of their preferences, right? So we created a place called The Other Web, right? It's otherweb.com on the web, or it's the Other Web app on iOS, Android. We even have a newsletter that is kind of still an experiment.
You do have an app then, okay? I saw the website. I didn't see the app.
Yeah. You know, so we have all of those, and we see that different people use different ones. So at least the anecdotal experience so far is that people above 60 consume the newsletter, people between 40 and 60 consume the website, and people 40 and down consume the apps.
That kind of makes sense. It does. Interesting.
So we're trying to appeal to everyone in some sense. Maybe one day we will know who our exact target audience is and be able to tailor the experience to them. I think at this point, the most I can say is it seems to appeal more to techies because we give people more knobs they can turn and sliders they can adjust and things like that.
Sure.
So you show it to a journalist. I've actually gotten the question, how do I use this? Whereas I show it to a techie, usually their reaction is, oh, cool, I can customize it. Right? So techies use it more. Information junkies like me use it more. And then we have an interesting segment of users who I would generally classify as people who gave up on the news a long time ago, but now are willing to give it a try again. Right? And we have even several advisors who are like that, but people who gave up on the news is about 42% of adults in the US right now. So it's a pretty big group. Like, how many of them could be brought back? I don't know, but this cleaner way of consuming it might appeal to them. There's also the opposite side of the coin, is that this cleaner way is a lot less addictive, right? You don't get the dopamine rush of so-and-so destroys somebody else, right? We don't have the destroys headlines. We actually initially were rewriting all the headlines of every single news item that we took. Now we are a bit more careful and we only rewrite the ones that trigger the clickbait filter, right? So if the article is bad, we throw it out. If the article is okay, but the headline's bad, we just rewrite the headline.
You rewrite the headlines. That's interesting.
Yeah, using an AI model. That is actually basically a summarizer of the body of the article.
Is that like is that an issue with copyright or?
Well, it's the opposite. If we use less of the original content and if we are more transformative to the content, that makes it fall more under fair use, right? So using the original headline is a questionable practice, you could say, from copyright standpoint. Rewriting it is actually better. We also don't include an excerpt of the original content. We generate our own bullet point summary, which is also rewritten. It's abstractive, so it tries to use very little of the original exactly. Tries to reword everything. We add a nutrition label that has the output of the various models that we ran on this content, right? And we make it look like a nutrition label because you're supposed to see one before you put something in your mouth, right?
I like that.
So why not see one when you put something in your brain?
Good idea. Yeah.
And we try to let people customize as much as they can. So right now there's 8 categories of news. And for each category, people can set their own slider position for how much do I want to see. And depending on how much they asked us for, we select the best content out of the one we scrape.
So you got kind of
that
a
matches
weighting.
that amount.
You're waiting.
Yeah.
That kind of what.
Yeah.
That's
But also beyond
that.
that, we're sorry. So just to complete the thought, we're trying to aggregate a whole bunch of other content besides the news. And so right now we have commentary, we have podcasts. So there's a built-in podcast player in there, which is kind of a vanity feature that I just felt like adding. There was no particular reason for it. We have research studies, we have Wikipedia, we have online courses, we have books. And again, the main idea behind adding all of those was, I don't know if this is universally applicable, but when I read something in the news and I see a phrase I don't know, I immediately want to ask, what's that? And find out more. And when you and I are talking, I can ask you, what's that? When you mention something I don't understand. But when I'm reading an article, it seems like people are trained to go into this mode of opening another window or taking out their phone, typing something into the address bar of their browser, which is kind of weird in itself, and then searching for it on Google, essentially. But my question was, why have all those extra steps? If I just saw this phrase in an article, why can't I just click on it and ask, what's that? Right? And so we implemented that, but our what's that also allows you to select, search for it on Wikipedia, search for it in research studies, search for it in online courses, etc. Because you might know what is the best source for this particular what's that you have.
That's very similar to like when you're on your phone. If you hold down on a word or whatever, it pops up a window where it'll tell you more about more. I don't know if maybe it's an app I'm using. I don't know. No. Maybe it's Kindle. I don't know what it is, but but it'll give you additional information or a definition, or you can go search for it.
So there's some apps that do this in terms of just dictionary definition, right? And then browsers have this feature for web search. But most of the time, if I want to learn more about something, it's not the web I want to search. It's research studies or Wikipedia, right? Like web might be an option, and I want to have that option, but it's probably not the most likely one. Also, sometimes I might just want to search the news. So I see something about an event. If I highlight the name of the event, chances are I don't want to go to Wikipedia. I want to see what news came out about that event lately. So we still have to play with it. It's our guess about what a normal UX pattern might be for people that is currently not being used. But we don't have UX researchers on the team other than my wife, but then she's not on the team. So occasionally I might just ask her, but her answer would usually be, well, you need about a couple dozen people to test. Do you have them? And do you have the budget? I say no. She says, then I can't help you. And
it's good to have the wife. Like sometimes I bring my wife in. Hey, what do you think of this design?
I do that too. But,
gotta do that.
But again, she's on the UX side of things, and she's used to doing things the right way.
Yeah.
And I'm used to thinking a designer is just a person who just gives you their gut reaction to stuff, and it's better than yours. But that's not the kind of designer she is. She's the kind of designer who gives you the structure of a proper experiment to verify it, which I don't have a budget for.
Gotta have the budget. No, this is actually interesting as I'm thinking about this pop-up thing. I'm still stuck on that. I'm like, what would be a good way to do that? You could have, and of course, because it's in the news. Yeah, Chat GPT. I'm like, it would be really interesting to have like a pop-up, like, and have like, even like, some queued questions like you might want to ask here, and you click it, and then Chat GPT just generates and then you can ask, maybe have a field, ask a little bit further, and have a whole chat going right there in context.
It could be. I think context is really important, because essentially when you open a browser window and type something into the address bar, you're losing the entire concept of what made you want to search this in the first place. And so Google has no idea. They are amazing at trying to guess your intent, but for them, context is what you searched for yesterday. It's not what you were reading right now, because they don't know you were in an app, right? And so I think we actually have more context than they do in some sense. But at the same time, we're not Google quite yet.
Yeah. It's really, that's important. I mean, I've been doing web stuff for 20 years, and always, especially in the early days, create an island. Don't let people go off your site. You want them to click. Don't give them any opportunities to do anything except click the link you want them to click. But because as soon as they're gone, They could be they accidentally close the browser, they accidentally, or they go down some rabbit hole that, especially if they're in YouTube, and they go down some rabbit hole and they forgot they were even reading your article on your website. And so to keep them in the website in context, I think that's a brilliant.
Yeah, I should mention that that's one of the things we penalize articles for is when all the references are just the links within the same outlet, because how can you verify that they're not just lying to you then, right? You're supposed to have external references when you make any sort of non-trivial claim. And so it's not that we are trying to keep people just within the ecosystem, but we think within the ecosystem we have more information for certain things. For other things, like under every article summary, we still have a link to the original so people can go and read it on the outlet that actually created this content, right? We're not trying to hide that link. We are opening it in a new browser window so people can continue to browse there, and hopefully they come back to us one day. But we're not trying to hide it, obviously, and that's another part of fair use. We have to link to the source, right?
Yeah.
But for search specifically, there was another pet peeve of mine that I think you're noticing a pattern. Some of our features are vanity features created because I had a pet peeve, essentially. So I have this pet peeve that when the search you make on Google or Bing or any one of these search engines has any sort of commercial tone to it, like best laptop or mattress reviews or anything like this, typically the results you get are complete rubbish, right? They look good, they have all the right keywords, but if you search for laptop reviews, not a single item you'll see in the top 30 on Google will have a single real review in it, right? It will all be copy-pasted text from the actual product manufacturer or from their online store with an affiliate link. Those will be all the top results in there. And so our initial reason of why we created our own search engine and built it inside the other web was so that I can create a little selector that says disable affiliate links. And it would just take results initially from Bing and then eliminate any website that had any affiliate link anywhere in it. And obviously you're not supposed to use that every time. You're only supposed to do that when you want real reviews, right?
Right.
But then eventually we expanded that to 8 different filters, the things that you can disable. And then eventually we decided it's too slow if you have to call Bing API every time and then do the filtering. So we called it a few million times and we just aggregated a lot of data. We learned how to rank it ourselves. And now we have our own index. And so we don't call any third-party APIs. We just have a search engine. Without trying to be a search engine company. It just sort of happened.
Yeah, looks like that way. Yeah, you're kind of heading in that direction. I at one point in my web career, I did a lot of affiliate marketing. So can't believe you're blocking affiliates. We got to make a living too, man. Well, I don't do affiliate marketing anymore. Anyway, there's
a lot of disciplines that I don't want to hurt them, right? They have to make a living, right? But I can't help but ask, was this what the user actually wanted to see?
You sound a lot like Google in the 2000s. We're not trying to hurt you. Well, they wouldn't even say that. They would just do stuff. And what? Where'd all my traffic go?
Well, that's a separate problem, right? That because they are 92% of the market, right? They can just experiment with people's livelihood to some extent, right? And then you will develop an industry that essentially what they're doing for the most part is divination. They're trying to guess what Google is doing. And it's almost like trying to figure out, what does God want of me to give me a plentiful harvest, right? So it's that kind of thing where all the SEO guys and the affiliate marketers are, what does Google want of me to give me all this free traffic? And I don't know if that results in something good for the user eventually.
No, probably not. So I have someone, we're almost at 55 minutes already. And usually I try to cap it by an hour, but I feel like we could just keep talking and talking and talking. We probably don't want to be here all day. But I did want to ask one real quick question, if you can keep it under 2 minutes.
Sure.
So you're creating this engine, we'll call it an engine, we'll call it a AI website aggregates all this information out there. What's that?
Platform.
Platform. This platform. We'll call it a platform. Are you, in terms of adoption, do you think, what is the trust factor there? Do you think a lot of people will, because it's AI, because they don't know how this is all pulled in, what's happening here, is that a challenge for you to convince people that this is, we're not trying to brainwash you, we're not trying to, change how you think or be in the world, we're actually doing this for the good? Is that part of the messaging?
It's part of the messaging and a part of the setup. So one of the reasons why all our models and data sets are source available is so that when people ask, are you trying to really just brainwash me into the right or into the left-wing propaganda, right?
Right.
And I'm just telling them, no, if you want, check my data sets. If you find anything wrong there, then make a mockery of me, right? But yeah, we're trying to be as transparent as possible, and we have to, specifically because people have become so suspicious by what everybody else has been doing lately.
That's why I ask.
So, yeah, people have a right to be suspicious because most algorithms do seem to be doing underhanded things. So at this point, I think we're setting this as a standard. Hopefully the rest of the industry is essentially forced to follow, whether it is because of public pressure or because of legislation in the EU, which might happen.
Yeah, I think the key word there, though, is transparency, right? It's just, here it all is. We're not trying to be nefarious. And if you got ideas, I'm sure you would implement it. And point that out. Guys, this is going to make me into a right-wing person or a left-wing person or this type of person, and I don't want to be that. Keep me in the middle or something.
Yeah, I should note, and this will take us beyond the 2 minutes you allotted for it, but I find that this left-right dichotomy at this point is so touchy and so fraught that even when we developed a nice model to categorize things into left-wing or right-wing, etc., we decided not to deploy it. So we have this model, people can look at the code, people can look at the data set, etc., but we're not using it. And in our nutrition label, we don't mention right or left. We're avoiding the subject completely, even though we are scraping from the right and from the left.
Right.
But it seems like even if you just call a right-wing article right-wing, somebody will be upset with you. Why didn't you call it extreme right-wing? Why didn't you call it alt-right?
Right.
Why didn't you call it centrist? It should really be the centrist position. You can't actually even use these words without just the entire world exploding.
It's a good call. That's the way to do it. All right. Well, let's call it. This was great. This was a lot of fun. I feel like we could, like I said, we could keep talking. I say that to almost every guest because we have some amazing guests on this podcast. But I love talking about this stuff, especially technology and all that. But if somebody was going to, so you already mentioned the website.
Yep. Otherweb.com. Otherweb.com.
Otherweb.com, and it can be found on all our devices, iOS and all that, in the app stores. I'm definitely going to be checking it out and probably downloading and playing on with it on my own phone because I don't like all the junk either. Even like Apple News, I don't want to take us beyond. Oh, we're not an hour yet. Even on like Apple News, it annoys. There's a particular thing that I block on Apple News, but you know what they do? They still put it there and they say, we blocked this, but you can see it anyway. Here's a link. So no, I blocked it because I don't want to see it. And sometimes it takes up the whole, above the fold. So no, I don't want to see it.
Yep.
That was a little side pet peeve of mine.
Yeah, since we went into the crowdfunding discussion a little bit, I should mention another place where you can find us is wefunder.com/otherweb.
There you go. Okay.
If you want to find us in that particular context and be a part of this, then that's a way you can participate.
Awesome. Yeah, before I digress anymore. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for joining us, Alex. Until next time.
Thank you so much, Matt. Bye-bye.
That's all for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, please subscribe if you haven't already and give us a thumbs up if we deserve it. If you want to comment on this episode's page, provide me with requests on topics for future episodes, or inquire about being a guest, please find your way to thebuilders.fm. You can contact me there or add a comment under these show notes. Now a word from our sponsor, my agency, Unified Web Design. We build custom websites, features, we maintain websites, we work with agencies to fulfill their web design and development needs, and more. If you're interested in our services or are looking for an agency to work with as a partner to build awesome sites for your clients, feel free to reach out to me at unifiedwebdesign.com. There's a handy contact me link at the top. Fill out that form and it will open a ticket, and that ticket will find its way to me. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next time.